Good afternoon. My name is Noel Radomski. I'm the director of WISCAPE, and I want to thank all of you for coming to today's inaugural WISCAPE Higher Education Finance Series. We are very honored to have a special guest to serve as the inaugural speaker of the series. Before I introduce the guest speaker, I just have two very brief announcements. One, if you haven't done so already, if you could please sign the registration sheet. We'd like to survey you in a very simple way with a link so that we can understand what we're doing well. If you have other ideas for the future for our higher ed finance series, so it's very simple. And then number two, our next series on the higher education finance program will be on July 16th from 1 to 4:30 here, titled The 2003-2015 Wisconsin Biennial Budget and its impact on the UW system and UW-Madison. Again, July 16th from 1 to 4:30 here in the Wisconsin Idea Room. So I'm very pleased to introduce today's guest speaker, Ambassador Tom Loftus. Ambassador Loftus continues to build upon his very distinguished career. Ambassador Loftus served a 6-year term on the UW System Board of Regents. He also served as the U.S. Ambassador to Norway from 1993 to 1997. He also served as a member of the Wisconsin legislature, representing Sun Prairie and the state of Wisconsin from 1977 to 91, as also serving as Speaker of the Assembly for 8 years. After Tom's presentation, he'll take questions. If you could please raise your hand, and we'll pass the mics around so that it can be picked up by everyone. So thank you for coming, and Ambassador Loftus, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I was a politician for about 14 years. I was a diplomat for 14 years. The basic difference between politics and diplomacy is that in diplomacy, the food is much better. Okay, the tuition freeze, regardless of how it came about, is welcome. It gives a chance to reset the relationship between the legislature and the UW system. Look at options for long-term funding, return the focus to the student, and ask the question, how best can the university help the growth of the Wisconsin economy? In diplomacy, it's always best to start with a dinner lubricated with wine. You do this because a personal relationship is necessary before negotiations can be productive. And the other essential is agreeing on some basic points before new policies are put out. If you don't, you're going to get into an ideological straitjacket with, this is my point, that's your point, we're sticking to our points. So I suggest we start with the grim new facts of student debt. College loan debt in America now exceeds credit card debt. Wisconsin students will soon hit the $1 billion mark in loans, and the average debt per graduate is $28,000 in Wisconsin, and that is also just about the median. This debt is a millstone around the neck of this generation of college students and a drag on economic growth. Faced with debt repayment 6 months after graduating, a person is likely to delay buying a car, find it much harder to get a mortgage, and will postpone marriage and starting a family. Unlikely to become an entrepreneur, start a business, or move across the country for opportunity. The iron law of debt is it will limit your view of options in your life. If you have debt and do not graduate, which is the majority in America, your road to the middle class will be full of detours. The purpose of a university is to produce graduates. a purpose of a university is to produce graduates. We need to add to that a purpose to produce graduates with the least amount of debt possible. One way, the best way perhaps, to hold the UW system accountable to the legislature and the regents and the people of the state is to reward graduation rates, increases in graduation rates, and acknowledge and reward containment of student debt. Another thing to put on the table, this is that same table we've had dinner on, we're now at the dessert stage, is to proclaim it a myth that most students can work their way through college in 4 years. The cost is too much, the pay is too little, time doesn't allow, and the advice is to become an unpaid intern or do community work at no credit. Another reality is to point out explicitly that some students subsidize other students, and this is probably not sustainable. Out-of-state students subsidize in-state students. It is more accurate to say that foreign students, most from China at 198,000, have become a new funding source for higher education in America. Undergraduate tuition levels in Wisconsin for students from another state are too high to attract many students to any campus other than Madison. However, not that high for international students yet. Tuition and fees at UW-Madison are $10,609 and just shy of $27,000 for out-of-state students. The regents recently told the campuses that they could admit up to 27.5% of their student body in the out-of-state category. Madison lobbied for 30%. Why is this funding source unsustainable? Well, there has been the start of a backlash, with a few universities adding a surcharge on top of the out-of-state tuition, the University of Illinois, because of political rumblings. When the regents lifted the cap to 27.5%, they were very skittish because they were well aware of the common complaint, why can't my kid get into Madison when he or she is well qualified? And here they were lifting the cap that had an impact on that. Foreign students will become much choosier when they realize how valuable they are, and second and third tier colleges and universities will lose their luster. But in the long run, the issue with foreign students is they can't stay in the United States after graduation. They are so important in enriching the life of the campus and bringing their corner of the world to our corner of the world, but they can't stay in Wisconsin, they can't work in the United States, they can't add to the economy, start a business, and they sure can't become citizens. And they are sorely needed. I hope that there is something in the new immigration package that will help these, and it is very important that the DREAM Act come into being. The final fact before we leave students, I don't know where we are in the dinner at this point, cigars on the outside. There are now rapidly expanding opportunities in Wisconsin to enter the university via the technical school system. MATC is now the main source of transfer students to Madison. 2 partnership programs guarantee enrollment as juniors at Madison if the first 2 years are completed at MATC. These are popular programs because the cost savings of doing it this way is significant, and these programs should be expanded by the regents. All right, what about the regents? And we have one of the newest members of the regents with us today. What about the regents and the way the system is governed? Merging the two state college systems in the early 70s and their full integration in the 1980s, with credit transfers made seamless, peer system for faculty pay instituted, old rivalries contained, was the greatest public policy achievement of the second half of the 20th century in Wisconsin. Think of this system with 180,000 students in this state. It is an amazing accomplishment. The job of the regents was to be the referee among the campuses, especially Madison and Milwaukee. Limit duplication of degree offerings, especially master's degree offerings, and implement the new pay structure for faculty, and then manage the cutbacks in state funding. All this was done well. However, it is definitely not like the Joint Finance Committee, where options are presented by staff to the regents, and the combination of selected options add up to a policy. In the case of the Finance Committee, that policy ends up as the state budget. The Joint Finance Committee, which was started in 1911 as an institution, is one of the other great accomplishments of the 20th century. And the regents should look at the historical development of the Finance Committee for some guidance. This history is now conveniently available in a book because the centennial of the Finance Committee was in 2011. Governor Walker just nominated, and the Senate unanimously approved, two great picks for the Board of Regents: former Governor Lieutenant Margaret Farrell and State Auditor Jan Mueller. Every governor spends a great deal of personal capital in choosing regents. It is the most sought after and prestigious appointment a governor will make. Regents have been talented and experienced people devoted to the UW system, but they now need a new structure that can better harness their skills and a process where policy decisions can be considered among options that they direct to be developed. My last point, I guess it's close to becoming time to call the taxi, is that some certainty in long-term state funding for the university system is needed. A funding strategy on keeping costs down for students and ensuring competitive faculty pay should be the foundation. A university is the faculty and the students. That should be the focus of the funding. The tuition freeze is a blessing in that it will force a rethink. The legislative leaders and the regents need to agree on a forum where this can happen. Now, there is a long-term funding initiative underway in this country, and on this campus in particular, and that is financing by alumni. If you haven't received a solicitation or mail or asked if you had made out your will yet, and if you haven't, could you include your alma mater, then your school isn't doing its job. Every university, large or small, has an aggressive campaign to raise money from alums. It's not too large a leap to take a next step. Wisconsin is the historical home of the cooperative movement. I think the first co-op in America was in Luck, Wisconsin. The home of the Mutual Insurance Company, and that most famous public stock company, the Green Bay Packers. Consider Madison, for example, making a stock offering to alumni at $100 a share. The university would get some additional funds, and the alumni would have a very easy option to participate. This would be voting stock. So each year there would be a stockholders meeting to decide how the money was to be used. My guess is the choices would be all about the students. I think we need some more direct democracy into the decision-making, and this would be one way to do it. Now, this may be a bad idea, this may be a good idea, but in diplomacy you learn any idea beats no idea. And work for the Packers. I want to get to questions so we can go to other issues besides this, but one thing the regents could do to show their, as the newspapers say, to show they get it, is that the cost of doing searches has gotten out of hand. You know, $100,000 to $200,000 to search for a position in the university is not uncommon. The other thing is that they could state that they're not going to play the game of paying huge money to executives because that's what every other university is doing, paying huge money to executives. Not that long ago in Wisconsin, the university chancellor's pay was pegged to the governor's pay. Well, the governor's pay started to fall so far behind that that had to be changed. But that was one of the progressives' ideas, is that if you're serving the state, you should be a little closer to the people, and you shouldn't, in this case, not be that far from the governor, but just think how far away from the faculty pay this type of pay is around the country. So, with that, I'll stop and you can have at me, and I appreciate it, and I compliment WISCAPE, a brainchild of David Ward's, and David Ward is a wonderful man, a great chancellor, and anything he does, I'm for. Thank you.
I have a microphone here.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. I was obviously very interested in your comments about the regents and how they could do a better job. And I wonder if you have particular insight, especially given your experience in the legislature, of how regents and other policymakers can best unpack the complexity of the revenues and expenditures for this large enterprise.
Well, there are several ways. One, the documents presented to the regents are not in a form that lend themselves to easy digestion or selection of options. For example, if you want to find out about student debt, you have to wade through a long paper on financial aid, so, which I did, but a lot of people aren't. The second is that I'm a speaker of the assembly who became a regent. The current speaker of the assembly was a regent who became a speaker. Robin Voss was one of the first student regents. He understands a little bit about the regents. So I think that when it worked well, when Dreyfus was governor and when Tony Earl and Tommy and before that, was when the president of the Board of Regents was a very active person at that end of State Street. And there was a personal relationship. When the issue of faculty catch-up pay came along, and there definitely was a need for catch-up pay in the 80s, that forced the legislature to come up with a committee. It was chaired by myself and Tommy Thompson, called the Committee on the Future of the University of Wisconsin System. This was a place where we could contain the issues, and especially the rivalries inside the system. And in order to get catch-up pay, we had to get a system devised of who to compare faculty, how to compare faculty. We couldn't compare La Crosse to Madison. So a system was set up that were of the peers of La Crosse, the peers of Madison, the peers of Milwaukee, and then what were those benchmarks, and that's how the faculty pay was then set. That settled that issue. It also, these hearings gave people all over the state a chance to come, not just faculty, students, or staff. Everyone came to these hearings and talked about their campus. We went to almost every campus in the state and held these hearings. And what came out of this was some very, very good bipartisan policy because we all heard the same input. So a process is needed. I hope that was a help. Yeah.
Thank you. Tom, you started out saying that the tuition freeze was a good thing, and then turned immediately to the big problem of debt. Mm-hmm. And I certainly agree that debt is a large problem. And by inference, keeping tuition low and tuition freezes might be one way of dealing with student debt. But I would like your reaction to an alternative scenario, which I'm sure you're aware of, and that is recognizing the fact, at least at UW-Madison, that tuition, in-state tuition, covers about half the costs of the education part of, instructional part of higher education. Many students, at least at UW-Madison, come from middle-class families, upper-middle-class families. The families have taken advantage of state preferential saving plans to save for colleges. They could, and their families could afford to pay full cost, generating substantial revenue, using some portion of that revenue to increase substantially need-based aid, which would do a lot to bring down the debt burden. And if we insist on the sort of untargeted approach of low tuition for everyone, we leave a lot of money on the table, and the question is, where's the revenue going to come from if it's not coming from tuition?
Well, there is a limited experiment, and I guess it's still an experiment at La Crosse, where tuition was raised on all students, and then in essence it was a kickback to some. In other words, so they generated inside the campus their own financial aid scheme. This was well thought out. They really lobbied for it. They had the whole community of La Crosse, the faculty, the student body. This was no, here's an idea. But even they said, now there's a limit to this. This is not a solution. This is a solution for La Crosse. And you have La Crosse and Eau Claire and Madison about comparable in the quality of undergraduate education. Definitely students, I could see on the Regents, students no longer felt that if they didn't get into Madison, that was the end of it. Actually, they were making choices to go elsewhere first. So let's wait to see what the La Crosse experiment turns out to be. Now, we already have, as you know, who's here from engineering? Yes, right. We already have differentiated tuition levels throughout the system based on your course of study. It costs more to go to engineering, it costs more to go to business. Platteville has a system where you pay a different tuition if you're from Minnesota, Iowa, or Illinois. It's not out of state and it's not in state, but this is for engineering. So there's a lot going on here that is directly at your point, and I think the Regents need to take a look now, all right, how have these things that were approved probably now 5 years ago, what's going on? There was also, Eau Claire did a program, did a initiative called the Pergolder program, same thing. They didn't have it quite as easy as La Crosse. There was a lot of resistance, a lot of resistance. The student body came to the Regents meeting, said, we don't want this, we don't want to raise tuition for this reason. Now, it passed the process that you need to go through at Eau Claire, and it went through the Regents, but that is also an experiment that needs to be seen. That chancellor is gone now. The chancellor at La Crosse is still there. The blues guitar playing Joe Gow, a wonderful chancellor, but he's the type of guy that can, sell it. Yeah.
That same thing was done here with
Oh, with the, yes, of course, the Madison initiative, right.
that and hold harmless grant that was put in place and lasted for a short time. I'm wondering your thoughts on, for the last 30 years, the state portion of funding for tuition costs has gradually been diminishing. And that was kind of a place that helped pay for a lot of that. So as that's diminishing, tuition is increasing. And I'm just wondering what your thinking is on the role of the state in its commitment to higher education and where that funding should be coming from, where the state isn't providing it.
One of the very common things you hear when you're of my generation or age is from your compatriots, God, we could have never gotten into Madison now, and we could have never afforded it. They're meaning that the educational requirements are so high and the cost is so high. But the important thing to do is to find out to get a number that everyone agrees on as to what the state pays for instructional costs. Okay, take out the federal research dollars, take out this, take out that, and for undergraduates. Now this cap on out-of-state students, for example, that was not involved in the Regents' decision, and it's not in the tuition freeze either. But so find out for undergraduates what the state is paying in instructional costs. And I think that will give you a fair benchmark. And that benchmark should be, here's where we are today, that needs to be increased. We have gone through a recession of some magnitude. And every time there is a recession of this, even a minor recession, demand to go to the university and college spikes. People, it's a place to go. There are no jobs. You get into college. It's whatever. That's how we have 180,000 students. It's probably too many. So it's not just the state support not keeping up. It's the growth of students as well. And some real soul searching needs to be done as to, is that number too high? Especially, is it too high if kids aren't graduating and then not and having debt at the same time? That is why you should really look at graduation rates, increase in graduation rates, retention rates, as a way to judge a campus. Did I obfuscate that enough, or was that good enough? Okay. Yeah.
You use a lot of peer comparisons for faculty salaries and things. I don't know if you know off the top of your head where our undergraduate tuition ranks among our peers, but my impression for years has been that UW-Madison's tuition is also low. And so this argument that a tuition freeze is such a blessing kind of loses its luster with that kind of comparison, especially when, as was just mentioned, the state supports
Yeah, I can. I mean, the money that was there for the tuition is still in the system. But the next tranche of tuition will not come in. I say it is a blessing, the tuition freeze is a blessing, because it will focus attention on funding for the university. Second, it was becoming automatic. In other words, the Regents never asked, show me a budget at 0 tuition or 10% or whatever. It was a formula. Well, here's how much money we have from the state. Here's how much we need. Oh my goodness, it turns out to be 5.5% every year. How did that magically happen? And of course, it was a deal between the DOA and the university. So I do not think that tuition comparisons should be used as a justification to increase tuition. I do believe that faculty pay comparisons are different, that they are the right comparison to peg faculty pay.
Two questions. One is, if you want a higher retention rate and graduation rate, one way to do that is to lower admission rates so you admit a higher quality pool, a smaller number of people. That flies in the face of the complaint that my kid can't get in. So it seems to me that there's sort of a contradiction between those goals. The second is, every time I ask my classes, if we had it set up so you could graduate in 3 years instead of 4 to save money, I get literally no takers in a class of 50 or 60 students. And so one question is, how do you tell the university you will be evaluated on the basis of your success rate on holding down debt in the end, when it's not the university that fully controls the students' time through the program and cost through the program? It'd be one thing if our problem was the way it was in the late 80s, early 90s, when we simply didn't have enough class seats for people to finish in 4 years. At least it's my impression that's not really the driver anymore. But it's really students choosing and wanting to spend that year or semester of study abroad, wanting to have the campus experience for a full 4 years. If that's really the driver of long-term choice of debt, why is that really the problem?
Well, I certainly wouldn't want to cut short by 1 year the best 4 years of your life for most people. So, I mean, there's human nature there. On your first point, UWM, and let's talk a little bit about UWM. When I say that the Regents had a job of refereeing between institutions, you know, it was decades. Milwaukee fighting Madison. Madison saying, you can't offer PhDs. And we had this ridiculous system of, you had a PhD program here in psychology, but at Milwaukee, it had to be called urban psychology. Same exact program. Finally, John Wiley, when he was chancellor, said, this is ridiculous. There's no such thing as urban psychology. And a deal was made of saying that Milwaukee, and a policy was established that Milwaukee is the second postgraduate institution in this system, and they should grow that postgraduate program. And they're now up to, I forget the number, but 13 or 14 PhD programs. But they're judging against their peer group, which has Wayne State and the University of Illinois, Chicago, and things in that. All right. The other thing that UWM did is abandoned the idea that they'd let everybody in and then people could flunk out at their leisure. They decided to judge themselves as to how many students they let in graduated. Now, in the initial part of this, of course, fewer students are admitted, but more students graduate. Now, this is something that the Regents, you know, really like. The other thing, I've forgotten your second point, but I'll remember it eventually. The other thing is that we have this vast pool of people out there who have some college, 2 years, 3 years, and they have no way of getting back in to finish that degree. There are some initiatives, but I think it's New Jersey has the Thomas Edison College, which is specifically focused on these type of people, and it's free. I think that's an important thing. Now, what was your last point?
Yes, that students don't choose to minimize their costs of education. It suggests they value something other than just minimizing the debt at the end. The university has a limited set of things it can do to change this.
Okay. Well, I do not buy the idea that the university has no responsibility for the students and the debt load that they individually take on. This is the worst debt there is. Literally almost impossible to just discharge in bankruptcy. It goes with you right through Social Security. Students, please tell your students that bankers will always win. And this debt and the student loan is an industry. Now, students have to begin to understand that the last thing to do, if they can avoid it, is to take out debt. And when you're a freshman and the first thing you do is fill out the financial aid form and the fellow or the woman at the assistant's office, well, you're eligible for these grants and these loans. Well, because you're eligible, that doesn't mean you should do that. That's why I'm a great believer in the technical colleges as a way into the university. You get a 2-year, kind of a 2-year hiatus on debt if you can, live at home. The credit hours are the same. The faculty there gets paid a lot more than the faculty in the system. So, and my comments on that, I guess. Yes.
In talking about debt of students, Congress has come up with many different repayment options. Not that they're great by any means, and debt is still there. It's going to be, it seems, part of everything. How do you feel about that and the new legislation that's coming out that says 150%? So if a student is starting out in college, starting this July, if they're a classic, typical 4-year program student, they have 6 years to complete that degree, and we know that many students will, for a variety of reasons, will not complete. Then their loans turn into unsubsidized loans with the interest.
Mhm.
Do you have any suggestions?
Well, the number I saw was over 55% of students in America start their loan repayment before they have graduated. These loans accumulate fees and penalties. Interest goes up. Pity the poor parent or someone else who has co-signed a loan that goes right onto their credit history, their ability to get a mortgage, their ability to do all of these things. On the interest rate, the Republican view is it should be a market rate. Well, it'd be 1% if it was a market rate. But I think that anything that they do that shows the true cost of debt will be welcome, but definitely not doubling the interest rate just for the heck of it.
All right. So, Tom, at what state of the art do you think the cost analysis and cost comparison procedures are within the system? 50 years ago, a committee I was on suggested that if you're teaching English 101 in Eau Claire, Oshkosh, and Whitewater, it should be common. The cost should be very close to one another. It's the same product to the same students. The outrage from the system was unbelievable. Nobody likes those kinds of comparisons. So, and we didn't have the horses to do anything about it. Has over the years they become more submissive, and the system become better. Is that a usable technique?
Well, one thing along those lines that is productive to look at is we have numbers on average student debt, median student debt, all of this. What would be instructive is debt by department, debt by major, and I don't think it's a good comparison teaching English at Eau Claire and teaching English here. The cost should be the same. Well, the professor here is going to get paid more, but relatively that it should be the same. Should we, in the future, universities be allowed to offer English as a subject? That's a joke. Okay.
One question is, I'll just have two very brief questions. One is discussed Professor Wachowski about different forms of tuition modeling. So my question is, on that question, other states have said, if you're at or below the median family income in that particular state, you'll pay, just making this up, $80 for resident undergraduates. And if you're from the same state as a resident undergraduate, your family income is above that median family income, you'll pay $100 in tuition versus $80. So therefore it reduces the transfer. It keeps things simple because low-income first-generation students have difficulty in some cases understanding the complexity. So that's one question. My second question goes to what you said earlier about the importance of focusing on graduation and retention and graduation given the escalating tuition. And my question is tied to, and Emily and Bob know about this, with the performance-based funding, that new model, or not necessarily a new model, for higher ed. So, Wisconsin Technical College now is constructing a formula with different outcomes so that they get rewarded or not rewarded based on gen ed, staying in your second year. So I'm curious on those two questions, the different tuition model and a different state financing model.
Well, anything that deals with management principles, evidence-based outcomes, performance-based outcomes is going to fail, and it'll always be turned back to help the incumbent, whatever it is. On the question of some people pay, who can pay $100 and those who can't pay $80, I don't agree with that. Our practice has been everybody pays the $100, but then you are given grants or aids or something else to reduce it to the 80 to simplify it. And I don't think it is politically feasible to charge one group of students a higher tuition rate as freshmen and a second group of students a lower tuition rate. The university and universities all around the country have to worry about their political credibility. One of the reasons I was so against this idea of spinning Madison off from the system was, in my view, this was an attitude that the people of this state who built this campus and all the others are the stakeholders, not the current occupants. And the people of this state have to have a renewed idea that they are the investors. And one of the reasons I suggest this stock issuing plan to alumni is so alumni get back the connection that they aren't just wanted for their money, that we would like some of their expertise and they could vote on policy and whatnot. That it? Okay. Yes, one more.
Could you just talk a little bit, you mentioned sort of changing role of the regions in terms of sort of the finance or some other model whereby they would look at alternatives and maybe proceed that way. Could you just talk about how you envision the role of system administration and the regions in that type of system?
Well, you know, there has been tension between the regents and the system of administration for ever since the system was put in place. And it boiled over at one point, and I forget when, the 80s or the 90s, when the regents hired their own staff. They had it. They didn't feel the system was, you know, they were treating them like mushrooms, keeping them in the dark and feeding them, you know. That actually, you know, didn't work because they could never get enough staff to develop alternatives. I think one of the staff members was none other than Judith Ward, the wife of the current chancellor here. If the regents could, as Bill knows and other people in this room, when you're appointed a regent, the first strategy is for the administration to send you 300 pounds of documents. The second part of that strategy is to get you in a room and read you the documents. The third part of the strategy is to get you into a meeting and go through the documents by PowerPoint. By then, you're brain dead. You're not, whatever. The regents have to take control of the information flow, all right? And it can be simple. We want information sent to us, budget alternatives sent to us in a way where we can make choices. If you want to talk about student debt, we would like a study on student debt, not a 24-page document on financial assistance that on page 10 is the chart that you want. There it is right there. Well, a lot of people don't get to page 10. So I hope that helps. The regents have to do this themselves.
You mentioned the increase in the cap on out-of-state students as part of this, and the astronomical increase from 25% to 27.5% as the decision came. But to my knowledge, none of our peer institutions, or few of them, certainly none in the Big Ten, have any cap on this sort of a thing. And it seems to me the perfect example of the extent to which the state micromanages this campus. And I don't mean that in an awful way that it sometimes comes across, but I wondered if you could speak to that point just a bit.
Sure. Well, first, that's the highest in 40 years, 27.5%. Second, the impact is on the other campuses. This dates from the Vietnam demonstrations and the idea that outer state students were the problem. It was sort of enhanced later on when the issue was my kid can't get into Madison. Well, it's evolved to, without this, what Madison wanted, 30% of out of state, without that, you do not have a funding source that has become very important to the funding of your campus. So you will see the other campuses in the university system focus on this 27.5% and try to hit that target, because that is a source of revenue that they have. But Vietnam, it all goes back to Vietnam. All right, one more? Yes.
We've been talking about the tuition freeze, but the other part of the budget was a reduction in the base budget state appropriations and a number of mandates that have to be self-funded. And presumably over the next couple years, there are reserve funds, that was the purpose of them, that will be used to get the university through the next couple of years. I worry about funding in the next biennium, not the one that's coming up, where we've gone down in base funding a lot, and at the same time, the legislature have made a permanent reduction in tax rates, as you know, and put in some new deductions, so revenue is going to be lower. How do you think the regents should respond to this new fiscal environment, where to keep funding of the university and allow the university system to maintain the level of education that it's provided, they're going to need a very large increase in the base budget to make up for what's happened in this budget, and the revenues aren't going to be there.
Yeah. Well, the legislature saw an opportunity to hit the university over the head, and they took it. Many of them long wanting this opportunity. I think that if the economy improves, you will see more revenues, you'll see more support of the university, but you will also see fewer students. So I think the only hope is that you have an improving economy. It takes students out of the system and it puts money in. I think the test will be if the regents can focus that money on student needs and faculty pay. That rarely comes as a question. The regents act like a court. If the right question doesn't come to them for a decision, it won't. You won't get a policy. Most days it's like traffic court, but that's another story. Okay. One more.
Can I ask one? Do you think the regents, or do you think, you say we have this great opportunity, do you think we're going to take advantage of it? Based on your experience with the regents and the legislature and everybody?
Depends on the leadership in the legislature and the leadership here. Now, your predecessor, who was the first lobbyist for profs, was one of those people who was a leader at that time that said to the legislature, now, it's not just the administration that has a dog in this hunt, it's the faculty, and here is the faculty's position, and that is so important. Okay, no.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.